Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel, of course, known as Dante's Boxing Nation. And Dante's Boxing Nation is going to talk about a recent comparison between that of Saul Canelo Alvarez and Javonte Tank Davis. And the comparison has been made now for quite a while, or I don't want to say quite a while, but a little bit now, because of course Canelo Alvarez, he was known as the face of boxing. And I do believe that he still is the main face of boxing. I think that when you bring it up to most people, that Canelo Alvarez is still the main face and the main boxer that most people can think of when it comes to mind. Of course, some people would argue that that's not the best argument for the face of boxing, that maybe you have to look a little bit towards the numbers. I think it's a little bit of both, but both, I think are needed probably to be somewhat of the face of boxing. But Javonte Tank Davis, of course, has gave it a great go. He has sold out certain events. Of course, his last pay-per-view event with Ryan Garcia, which was a mega fight, at least in terms of the promotion and in terms of, how much hype that fight was going to get behind it. It was a fight that was already a few years in the making. And I believe that the fight did pretty much exactly what I had predicted. It did about 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, which is pretty much what I expected. But anyways, Dante's Boxing Nation, he's going to be talking about how, in his view, Javonte Tank Davis has eclipsed that of Canelo Alvarez as the face of boxing. And as we all know, Dante's Boxing Nation and a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, they've been trying to allege for a very long time that Canelo Alvarez never really was the face of boxing because they never really liked his ass in the first place. They never really liked fighters like Lomachenko or Canelo Alvarez at the top of the pound-for-pound list. And I get their perspective. I understand a lot of the times, quote-unquote, old media or ESPN, they may push certain fighters, especially over that of black fighters. I get it. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at certain fighters like Canelo and Lomachenko, those were two fighters that deserved to be at their point in time in their career. They deserved their flowers as the debatable number one pound-for-pound fighter. Really, Canelo Alvarez deserved his spot as the undisputed number one pound-for-pound fighter. I don't think that there's really any debate about that, at least if you took a look at his resume. But it is what it is. Anyways, Canelo Alvarez, he's going to be talking about recently how a person, I believe in a particular interview of his, how he said that Javonte Tank Davis was the new face of boxing. Canelo gave his opinions on it. So did Dante. I thought it was very interesting. And of course, we all know that that fight between himself and John Ryder is going to happen tomorrow. So I thought that it'd be very interesting to talk about. Let's chime in.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So apparently Canelo Alvarez, he's not taking the news too well of Javonte Tank Davis being the face of boxing today. Canelo, he was recently asked in an interview to give his thoughts on people saying that now Javonte is the face of boxing. And Canelo, he said, I'm not retired yet. They can say whatever they want, but it's not that easy. One fight don't put you in that position. You need to do a lot of things. But I like Javonte. I like Javonte Davis a lot. But you need to do more things to be the face of boxing, not just one fight, and one fight with Ryan Garcia. I respect Ryan Garcia, but what he brings to be the face of boxing, end quote. Okay, there's a lot to unpack, but let me start by saying this. The face of boxing is not a mythical title. It's not just some type of political talking point. The face of boxing is based on the numbers, and we know the numbers don't lie. It's based on the statistical facts. Now, while Javonte Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, 400,000 buys just for DAZN alone, and 700,000 to 800,000 for Showtime PBC. Not to mention, forget about Ryan Garcia for a second. If you just look at Javonte's last, 4 or 5 opponents, no matter who Javonte faced, it was a big event the week of the fight. The week before the fight, leading up to the fight, it was a big event. Everyone was talking about it. Now Canelo Alvarez is fighting this weekend, and no one is even talking about it. A lot of people...
Well, let me pause Dante right there. And I understand a little bit what he's saying and what Canelo Alvarez said. I 100% agree with Canelo Alvarez. And for Canelo Alvarez allegedly still being in the prime of his career, we're not really going to know that until his next few fights, until probably after that John Ryder fight, but it's going to be a great indicator of if he looks much better than what he did in his prior two fights. We'll just have to see about that. But I would agree that Canelo Alvarez still is the main face of boxing. I would say that Javonte Tank Davis is going to be the new face of boxing once Canelo Alvarez completely falls off that mountaintop, if he does within the next couple of years, or within that next year, if he fights Dimitri Bivol in that rematch, which I believe more than likely that he will. But I agree with Canelo. To be the face of boxing, I think that you need a consistent body of work. And right now, Dante and a lot of these guys are trying to allege that Javonte Tank Davis, that he's the main face of boxing right now, and that he eclipsed Canelo because he had a super huge mega fight, at least a hyped up fight between himself and Ryan Garcia. And they're saying, oh, take a look, it did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. Well, if we're really going to go into the numbers, when we just really take a look at the past couple of years, Canelo Alvarez, his events have usually done anywhere from 500,000 to over 1 million pay-per-view buys. When you talk about his fight against Caleb Plant, it did 900,000 pay-per-view buys. And these guys, like Dante and Boxing Eagle, they were almost silent about those numbers because they didn't want those numbers to be that high. When you talk about his trilogy against Gennady Triple G Golovkin, that was his last fight. No one talks about it, but that last fight, I believe, did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. At least from what I know now. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But that's just, the results that I ended up seeing with the statistics that I ended up looking up, and almost no one talks about that. So at the end of the day, and that was looked at as a fighter, and Gennady Golovkin, that was not the same fighter. So once again, Canelo Alvarez is still the main face of boxing, but what I will say is this: it's almost kind of like that point where LeBron James, when he went out to the Western Conference and when he didn't make the playoffs with the LA Lakers, people are taking a look at him and they're like, yeah, you're still somewhat the main face of the league, but it's almost getting up for grabs to where if you don't come back in good fashion, you're pretty much going to lose your throne as the main face of the league. And Canelo Alvarez, in my view, is in a very, very similar situation. And there very much could be a changing of the guard. There very much could be a changing of the crown, no doubt about it. But Javonte Tank Davis, if we're also going to get into the raw and concrete numbers, I believe the statistics that I ended up seeing, Javonte Tank Davis, other than the Ryan Garcia fight, he's never done an event that's done over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. And we could talk about how he sold out arenas, but at the end of the day, people knew that the opponents that he was fighting, that they weren't really that big of opponents. Because once again, if they were, you would have been doing over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So let's calm down about the overall, allegations about how Javonte Tank Davis, about how he's eclipsed Canelo Alvarez as a new face of boxing. I get it. And do I believe that he will be the new face of boxing? I believe that he will be if he stays and is able to beat fighters like Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, or Vasily Lomachenko, which I believe that he has the potential to truly beat all those fighters. I think that he has the highest potential out of any of those fighters because of his athleticism combined with his boxing ability. But anyways, when it comes down to it, let's calm down a little bit, because the fight against Ryan Garcia was a fight that was a few years in the making. A lot of them knew who Ryan Garcia was. Ryan Garcia had a great following. And once again, it's not like Javonte Tank Davis had been doing continuous 500,000 and 700,000 pay-per-view buys, and then he finally broke the 1.2 million park barrier. Like, he didn't even do 500,000 before he ended up fighting Ryan Garcia. So let's relax a little bit.
People don't even know he's fighting this weekend. It's almost like Jaime Munguia is fighting this weekend. When you are the face of boxing, you also have a responsibility to make sure that you're challenging yourself to continue to bring in the statistical numbers to prove that you're the face of boxing. Canelo, he could have...
Yes, which Canelo Alvarez has usually done. Like I said, his last fight against Gennady Golovkin, the pay-per-view numbers, at least from what I know, they did just as much, pretty much as what the Ryan Garcia versus Javonte Tank Davis fight did. Now, if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me, but those are just the numbers that I ended up hearing about and that I seen when I looked them up. Maybe I'm wrong. You know how sometimes the pay-per-view numbers, they can be a little bit skewed in different directions depending on the website, but that's just what I have seen.
Chose to fight Jamal Charlo, David Benavidez, Bivol next, but he decided to fight against John Ryder in Mexico by way of...
Yes, because once again, he's healing from that hand injury, the surgery, when it comes down to it, and on top of that, he's kind of testing the waters, and he's taking a couple of tune-up fights before he fights out of Dimitri Bivol. Which is what I've been saying now for the past year. These guys have been trying to allege that Canelo is avoiding the Dimitri Bivol fight. I've always said that, in my view, he was never avoiding the Dimitri Bivol fight. He was just taking a couple tune-up fights, which is, once again, in my view, a very wise idea. That's what Deontay Wilder should have did before he fought Tyson Fury. He should have probably waited a year, probably even a few years, and got a new trainer, got a complete new corner, or at least, a different trainer on his squad, and then fought Tyson Fury. It's not always a great idea to rematch a greatly dominant fighter like that of a Tyson Fury or a Dimitri Bivol, especially when they had your number in that fight. But anyway.
Contrast, Javonte Tank Davis has been selling out arenas all across the country. Even when Canelo fought Bivol, there were empty seats all around the arena. So once again,
Right, but Dimitri Bivol was not looked at as a colossal opponent, according to many people's eyes. Now, for those of us that knew shit about boxing, like myself, we knew that Dimitri Bivol was a very, very underrated opponent heading into this fight, because Dimitri Bivol is a great fighter. There is no doubt about that. He's a greatly talented and a greatly intelligent and greatly skilled fighter. But he is a European fighter, and a lot of those European fighters, they don't usually do quite as well with that of the pay-per-view numbers. It just is what it is. And when I say European, I'm talking about from Europe. I'm not just talking about someone that has a Caucasoid complexion, because of course Canelo, he has somewhat of a Caucasoid complexion, but he does great numbers. But he's also from, the country and the nation of Mexico, and we all know that they have a much bigger following. But Dimitri Bivol in the rematch, I promise you that those numbers, they're probably going to skyrocket, anywhere from 700,000 to maybe over 1 million pay-per-view buys. So like I said, I agree with Canelo Alvarez. Right now, he still is the main face of boxing, but I also do have to say that right now it is wavering. And as Boxing Eagle has been saying, it could be, potentially that we have seen the beginning of the end of Canelo Alvarez. Right now, I don't really know where he is at this point in time in his career, but let's see what happens.
The face of boxing is not based on your opinion. It's based on the actual numbers. And these numbers are basically points, which makes Javonte Tank Davis the score leader. I mean, if this was the NBA, right now, Canelo Alvarez, he's averaging 6 to 8 points a game. And Javonte is blowing him out of the water, averaging 30 to 50 points a game. Something else.
No, Dante, actually, that's not really the right comparison. But that just shows you how idiotic, or really how delusional, or really how facetious Dante really tries to be. I've already stated this. I don't think Dante truly believes in a lot of the shit that he says. To say and compare it to the point to where Javonte is blowing Canelo Alvarez out of the water, by 5 to 6 points to, to 30 or 50 points, no, that doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to say that if we're going to make that comparison, that Canelo, if he's scoring 15 points, that maybe Canelo Alvarez, or excuse me, if Javonte Tank Davis, maybe he's scoring, say, 25 to 30, then maybe that'd make it more comparable. If we were to talk about, maybe the John Ryder pay-per-view. But once again, this is the only fight where Javonte Tank Davis has ever even done anything close to 1 million pay-per-view buys. Once again, all those other previous fights, and they tried to say all this shit about how he sold out arenas. You know what they never talked about? How in the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight, they wouldn't even release the pay-per-view numbers because they know that pay-per-view bombed for Javonte Tank Davis. But no one ever talked about that. And don't get me wrong, Javonte Tank Davis is a great fighter. But Javonte Tank Davis and these guys, this is one thing that always annoys me and I think is obnoxious. They always love to talk shit about, certain fighters they don't like Canelo Alvarez, about he's allegedly ducking this guy and ducking that guy. But when it comes to Javonte Tank Davis, oh, can you believe it? He's facing Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Mexican Mike Tyson. He's facing Hector Garcia and all these dangerous fighters. Like, dude, Javonte Tank Davis has never really actually been in the ring with someone that can actually compete with him on a full all-around level. That's just the truth of the matter. Now, Ryan Garcia has so far probably been the best fighter that he's been in the ring with. But like I said, when the best fighter that you've ever fought has never even won a belt and don't even have 20 fights on his record, I believe, what does that really say about your resume?
Canelo Alvarez, he said, that didn't make any sense when he was trying to justify why he believes that he's still the face of boxing. He said, I haven't retired yet. Well, I got news for you, Canelo. Oscar De La Hoya, he didn't retire after he lost to Floyd Mayweather. Canelo is trying to make it seem like being the face of boxing is just making it into the Hall of Fame. Once you make it, you don't have to ever worry about being removed. It doesn't work that way. Once you become...
Well, I agree with you. When you're a top of the line athlete, you always have something to prove. Even if you have already proven yourself to be an all-time great fighter or all-time great at your profession, as long as you're playing or as long as you're competing, you always have something to prove. That's what I personally believe. But Canelo Alvarez, once again, I need to see his next couple of fights to truly say that Javonte Tank Davis is the complete face of boxing. Because like I said, he's only ever had one fight that had 1 million pay-per-view buys. That'd be like a Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. if they had their next fight. And that's like me saying, oh, well, you know what? Well, one of those fighters must be the new face of boxing. Like, that doesn't make sense. You're comparing a super fight, one that was in the making already for a few years, compared to a fight against John Ryder that not a lot of people really wanted in the first place. Now, certain people will say, well, why is Canelo facing John Ryder if you admit overall that no one wanted to see that fight in the first place? Like I said, Canelo Alvarez wisely, in my view, is taking a couple of tune-up fights to get back into his mojo before he is fighting Dimitri Bivol, which he has already stated that he's going to do after the John Ryder fight. Of course, if he's able to get past John Ryder, which I predict more than likely that he will, but who knows?
The face of boxing, you have to work even harder. You have to continue to win. You have to continue to win some of the most significant fights. And this is something Canelo Alvarez was not able to do. You guys have to remember.
Well, if we're talking about winning some of the most significant fights, Dante, why are we talking about Javonte Tank Davis? Because other than Ryan Garcia and maybe Leo Santa Cruz, what significant fights, and I'm not really talking about in terms of popularity, I'm talking about in terms of real deal competition, because I think that's what Dante's alluding to. Like, is Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Rolly Romero and Mario Barrios, are these guys like top of the line fighters? And this is one thing that always annoys me. Like, these guys love to talk so much shit on certain fighters like Canelo or other fighters about how they're allegedly avoiding and ducking. But then when it comes to their favorite fighters facing bums, bottom of the barrel opponents like Isaac Pitbull Cruz or Rolly Romero, two people who are never going to be A-grade level fighters, when it comes down to it, then all of a sudden they give them a round of applause. Once again, let's treat everyone with the same amount of energy.
Canelo,
or let's keep the same standards.
Is in a very unique situation because he's one of the only fighters that I know of that eventually became the face of boxing, mainly because he lost to the real face of boxing, Floyd Mayweather. That's what made Canelo Alvarez popular, or more popular. Remember, he was also fighting on Floyd Mayweather's undercards before they fought against each other. So Canelo Alvarez's biggest claim to fame is losing to Floyd Mayweather, while Javonte's claim to fame is knocking out almost every single opponent that he faces as the competition gets better and better. Now I'll close.
As the competition gets better and better, once again, and let's just be real here, what elite fighter at 135 pounds cannot beat someone like a Rolly Romero or an Isaac Pitbull Cruz, or Mario Barrios might be a bit bigger, but still Mario Barrios? Like, none of these guys are A-grade fighters, dude. Like, it just so annoys me how I hear some of these narratives. Like, dude, Javonte is not fighting elite opponents. He hasn't been fighting even really that good of opponents. They're okay. They're good, but they're not great by no means. It just is what it is. Canelo Alvarez within the past few years, he's been in the ring with Danny Jacobs. He's been in the ring with Triple G. He's been in the ring with Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith. He's been in the ring with Dimitri Bivol. He's been in the ring with all these guys.
I was saying this, though.
And that's not me saying that every single one of those guys are A-grade fighters, but a lot of them were.
Canelo Alvarez, he is right. He's not retired yet, and that does mean he still has a chance of becoming the face of boxing. But to do that, he would have to take the biggest challenges. He would have to fight a David Benavidez, a Jamal Charlo, a Demetrius Andrade, a Bivol. And the most important thing is he would have to win those fights the way Javonte wins his fights, in dominant fashion. And we know that's not going to...
Well, let's not compare Canelo Alvarez fighting David Benavidez and Jamal Charlo, and what's his name, Demetrius Andrade, and some of these other guys, and Dimitri Bivol. Let's not compare Canelo Alvarez winning dominantly against those guys with Javonte Tank Davis dominantly beating pretty much bottom of the barrel opponents at 135. And I'm not going to say bottom of the barrel, but they're medium of the barrel. Like, no one is ever saying that Isaac Pitbull Cruz is ever going to be an elite fighter. Like, come on, dude. Like, who the hell do you think you're fooling? Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Like, come on. You know, Rolly Romero, the dude who has no boxing ability whatsoever. Like, Deontay Wilder has better pure boxing ability than Rolly Romero. Mario Barrios, who was never even a legitimate champion. Hector Garcia, where the biggest win of his career was over a dude in Chris Colbert, or Chris Colbert, whatever the hell his name was. You know, when it comes down to a guy that had no power and a guy that had overrated boxing ability. Once again, let's let the facts, state, let the record state that Javonte Tank Davis has never done a fight before the Ryan Garcia fight. Ryan Garcia is known for having millions upon millions of followers on Instagram and being one of the main faces of boxing, not in terms of accomplishments, of course, but in terms of the attention that he brings when it comes down to it. So, once again, he had to get that fight to get over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Okay? That's the fight that he had to get. And he's never done anything even close to 400,000 pay-per-view buys other than that fight against Ryan Garcia. So once again, I have no problem with saying that Javonte Tank Davis is the face of boxing. I just don't think that he's there yet. I think that he's on his way. And I think that if Canelo Alvarez truly is going out the door, that he is going to be the next face of boxing, because I just don't see anyone else who's going to take that place. I don't, Shakur Stevenson, maybe. He might have that, but he doesn't really have the same amount of appeal as Javonte Tank Davis, because Javonte Tank Davis has that power and he can put on more of an entertaining event. Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence, maybe, but Terrence Crawford is getting up there. He's about 37, 38 years of age. Errol Spence Jr., I don't really know how much longer he's going to be around. Usyk, he's a European fighter. I don't think he's ever really going to be the face of boxing. Fury's up there, but he's not really going to be around for much longer, in my view. I just don't really know who else is going to take that place. Maybe Devin Haney, but I don't really see Devin Haney either. I don't think a lot of people connect with him quite as well as what they do with Javonte Tank Davis, at least in terms of his style. Javonte Tank Davis brings a lot of, of that profile.
Happen. This is the reason why Canelo has chose to fight John Ryder, because he knows how difficult it would be to beat those guys that I just mentioned.
He's fighting John Ryder so he can get prepared for the Dimitri Bivol fight, and I've been explaining this for the past year.
That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's really about it. I just find it always hilarious how Dante has such a clear vitriol for Canelo Alvarez and the hypocrisy in a lot of his statements, but it is what it is. I just thought that was very interesting, because I will say this, I do believe that Javonte is going to be the newer face of boxing. Now, whether that's going to be within the next 5 years, because we don't know how much longer Canelo Alvarez has, whether that's going to be within the next year, whether that's going to be within the next 3 years, I don't really know, but he certainly is one of the newer faces of boxing. I'll say this, I believe that as of right now, Canelo Alvarez still is number one, but Javonte Tank Davis is right there at number two. He brings a lot of profile, he brings a lot of pizzazz, he brings a lot of electricity to his fights, no doubt about it. And I think that he is going to be the new face of boxing. And I really hope to see him in high-profile level fights against Devin Haney, Lomachenko, Josh Taylor, Teofimo Lopez, and Shakur Stevenson. Those are the type of fights that you have to compare it to. Like Dante's trying to compare it, Canelo Alvarez fighting, literally the best of the best opponents of his weight divisions, some of the best fighters on planet Earth, against Javonte Tank Davis fighting Hector Garcia and Mario Barrios and Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Rolly Romero. Like, come on, dude, who you fooling? It just is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later, and we'll see how this fight goes tomorrow. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.